The relationship between Vox and Alastor is so interesting because Vox and Alastor are the exact same person. And it's because of their similarities that their relationship has turned toxic so fast. And as we've been getting more information in the new season about Alastor and Vox, I can't help but wonder what's going to happen to these characters and more specifically what this is going to mean for Alastor. And as the season continues on, I can't help but wonder what's going to happen when Vox and Alastor eventually have to truly face off. And honestly, I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen when Vox is out of the picture and if Alastor is going to become a true villain of Hazbin Hotel. But before we get to all of that, I think we need to really go over how similar Alastor and Vox truly are. And I think a perfect place to start is in the flashback in which Vox and Alastor had their original falling out. The first thing we need to point out is that Vox is not acting anything like how he usually does within the series. At this point in the story, Vox is more open and gentle, trying to get somebody to agree with him rather than to force them to agree with him. Alastor in this scene is pretty much how he is in the pilot episode and in the beginning of the series. He's very kept to himself, suave, and obviously in control. There's an air of power that we're able to see with Alastor in which he obviously feels like he is above everyone else. And as we're watching the scene, we all know how it goes. Vox proposes a partnership and Alastor laughs in his face. But there are two very important things that we are supposed to get from this scene. The first one is that Vox and Alastor think that they can gain power through the same way. Yes, I know that in this scene, Alastor says that he is not going to make a partnership with Vox because you are supposed to gain power by yourself, but think about it. Alastor originally gained his power through Rosie and is now trying to gain even more power through Charlie. When you really think about it, Rosie and Charlie are basically the off-brand version of Valentino and Velvet. Both Alastor and Vox gain power through the relationships of other people, so if that's the case, then why is Alastor laughing in his face? Well, that brings me to the second most important thing, that both of these characters are unable to have true relationships, which is why they are so toxic to each other. First, I think it is very obvious that Vox had some sort of feelings towards Alastor, but I also think that subtext shows that Alastor had something for Vox as well. Whether that was romantic feelings or just a deep feeling of friendship, I'm not too certain. But I think that we can gather from this scene that there was a close relationship between these two, even if it wasn't on equal terms. The reason that Alastor was laughing in Vox's face, telling him that they could never create a partnership, is because he wanted to distance himself from Vox. And why did he want to distance himself from Vox? Well, because Vox is trying to gain power in the exact same way that Alastor is trying to do it. At this point, Vox has become a threat to the goal that Alastor is trying to achieve, which is why Alastor was trying to break him down in this scene. And yes, Alastor did end up mentally scarring Vox to the point where he can't even achieve his goals without having to gloat in his face. But honestly, this backfired because instead of pushing Vox away and pushing him to a different path so that he can become the most powerful sinner, Vox ended up just completely copying Alastor. Down to the point where even their aesthetics are similar, and that brings us to present day, in which Vox and Alastor are doing the exact same things because they're the exact same person. Alastor scarred Vox so much that he basically stole his entire identity. Both of these characters focus on some sort of media, Vox with television and Alastor with radio. Both of these characters originally come off as suave demons, being able to charm people through not only their power but also their wits. They use their intelligence to control people, and this control over others gives them intense satisfaction. And why? Because both of these characters have the exact same goal, which is having power. At the end of season 1, Alastor flat out told us that he wants to be the person pulling all of the strings. He is eventually working towards becoming the most powerful person in hell. On the flip side, in season 2, Vox flat out told us that his main goal is to become God. He wants to become the ruler of everything. And that's not even all, because the mannerisms that both Vox and Alastor have become eerily similar. They have outbursts in similar ways, they show frustration in similar ways, and they take joy in similar ways. Both of these characters hide behind a persona. Alastor hides behind a smile, and Vox hides behind his TV personality. But what does this all mean, and what is this going to mean for the future of Alastor? So what if these characters are similar? They're obviously parallels of each other, and they obviously have a pretty close connection. Well, what if I were to tell you that the end result of Alastor is going to be eerily similar to Vox's because of their similarities? Alastor ended up disappearing for 7 years, putting him behind Vox, who was able to grow an entire empire within that time. Before Alastor disappeared, appeared, he was stronger than Vox, but now I would say that Vox definitely has the edge. And how was Vox able to gain all of that power? Well, we see his destructive and evil empire. We see the terrible things that he had to commit in order to gain that. All of this to say, Vox is the future of Alastor because they are the exact same person. And I think that many people have been noticing within season 2 that Alastor has been getting beaten a lot. And that is by design because he's supposed to be embarrassed. He is supposed to feel like he is weak and helpless because that's the exact same feeling that he gave to Vox when he denied him, when he laughed in his face. And now Alastor is feeling dejected, hurt, and obviously embarrassed. And for somebody as prideful as Alastor, for somebody with so much self-worth, he is never going to allow this to continue on. Obviously, the V's are eventually going to lose, and Vox isn't going to be able to keep up his power struggle for long. So what happens in the power vacuum that is created once Vox is defeated? Well, there's a pretty good argument to be made that Alastor will actually take up that mantle, especially because he is the person who is most similar to Vox. When we hear about Alastor in the first season and what happened when he originally went down to hell, he was an absolute menace. This was a person who was taking out the most powerful overlords and broadcasting their screams across hell. So wouldn't it make a lot of sense that if a media empire completely collapses and is in need of somebody to take over, that Alastor would be the person who does that? If I were to take a guess as to what's going to happen to Alastor within season 2, I would assume that the deal with Charlie is going to be the most important. Why? Because to have complete control and autonomy over his body, he's going to need to get his soul back from Rosie. And I think that Charlie is truly going to be the key. And once Alastor is free from Rosie's grasp, that's when he's going to be able to truly become a powerful person. The more souls an overlord controls, the more powerful they become. And if Alastor ends up taking over the empire that Vox created, he's gonna be pretty strong. And because he would already have the power that Rosie gave him, he may actually become the most powerful overlord we've ever seen. But if that were to be the case, then we would also have to assume that Alastor and Charlie would become enemies. And I'm not too sure how that would actually play out within the show. Would Charlie actually be able to get through to Alastor, or will Alastor somehow use his deal in order to make sure that Charlie isn't able to stop his plans? Regardless of how this would play out, it would still mean that Alastor would be the next main villain of Hazbin Hotel. And to me, this just makes a lot of sense. I think that there is an obvious strong relationship between him and Vox, and although it might be toxic, I think it also shows us what his future might hold. Somebody who craves power above all, who wants to be the one in control, and eventually he will climb over people who he cares about in order to do so. In season 2, I think we're going to get some better examples on how Vox doesn't truly trust the V's and how he will use them in order to gain powers. I think it's clear that both Vox and Alastor do have relationships that they care about, Vox with the V's and Alastor with the people at the hotel. But in the end, I have a feeling those connections will not mean anything to either character because their pride will not allow it. And we really get to see how Vox is screwing over the people that he supposedly cares about in episodes 5 and 6 of season 2. Vox just can't help himself, and we see how angry both Velvet and Valentino are getting with him. And I find the conversation between Alastor and Vox right before Vox goes out on stage to be truly telling in how Vox feels. He's not really contributing anything other than his personality, and yes, people do associate the V's with Vox, but also without Valentino and Velvet, nothing could have been accomplished. But Vox doesn't really see it that way. Unfortunately, the other V's do, and that is causing them to start to clash. And this collapse of the V's is of course all a part of Alastor's plan. Alastor's main goal is to break the connections between Vox, to isolate him, and to make him feel like he can't trust anyone. It's the same thing he did all those years ago because Vox is the only person who he truly feels like is an equal. And once Vox is defeated and he loses his power, Alastor will be there waiting in the wings to swoop that up. And this of course would be how Alastor eventually becomes the main villain of Hazbin Hotel. But that's all I got for today. So if you guys liked the video, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. It really does help out the channel a lot. If there's a specific character or show that you guys want me to go over, put it down in the comments because I may see it and I might do a video on it. But that's it. So until next time, Tanuki crew, peace.